Hello, listeners of EFOPLI Connects. I'm Anna Souza, a Letras Inglês undergraduate student and Saber Conectado's scholarship holder. The topic of this episode is digital integration in the classroom. And to discuss this theme, I'm here today with Dr. Linda Molin-Karakoç, a senior researcher and early career impact and engagement fellow at the Institute of Education at University College London, UCL, where she works at the intersection of research, policy, and practice. As an applied linguist and teacher educator, her work focuses on technology integration, multilingual education, and mobile-assisted language learning, particularly with refugee and other marginalized learners, investigating how digital tools can support equitable and inclusive learning across classroom contexts. Linda, we would like you to feel welcome here at the podcast, and I think we can all see that you are a very versatile researcher. So is there anything else that I can add to your introduction?
Thank you. I think that introduction was great, and I'm happy to be here today.
Perfect, I'm glad to hear that. So I'm going to dive straight into the first question. Based on your research and your experience, is integrating technology a must for teachers?
Thank you. This is such an interesting question, and of course, very topical for teachers all over the world. Knowing how AI is taking over, is being introduced, and I would say that some level of digital integration has become essential. And this is, of course, because technology shapes how we communicate, how we work, learn, and participate in society today. As you probably know from your own practice, students are already using many different tools. They're navigating digital environments through their everyday practice. And these practices can also be sometimes more sophisticated than what they're doing with technology at school. That being said, of course, when it comes to teachers, I think it's important to bear in mind that technology integration should not happen, as in a way that technology is used for technology's sake, right? I think the goal is also to not just add new tools such as apps into classroom, but to make sure that they support learning, participation, and equity. And saying this, I think there's one issue which I care very deeply about when it comes to technology these days, and the discussions around technology all around, and that's the digital divide, because access to devices, to connectivity, and even to just digital literacy skills are very unequal, both globally and also in certain local contexts. So just to give you an example, when I mentioned AI, in some contexts, for example in the US, there are students who are learning to use AI strategically already in middle school, in high school. Whereas in other contexts, other countries, there are students who still lack internet connectivity, or even they lack personal devices. So I think it's very important to bear this in mind that, for some learners, the digital divide still exists.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, digital integration is a must, but it's more important to make sure that it is equitable and it's context sensitive to the learners and to the teachers who are actually using it.
I understand. And as you said, students, even if they have different levels or ways of engaging with this technology, depending on the, for example, social political or social economic backgrounds, in this connected society, they are going to come across this kind of technology in one way or another. And it's incredibly important, this idea of seeing the teacher as a relevant and central mediator to this kind of connection, right? Because we can develop these digital literacy skills with a multitude of tools in the classroom. And it is very important, I think, this idea of making the teachers be prepared for this sort of need, right? And also in your research, you mentioned the concept of classroom ecology. So, how does it impact what teachers do with this digital technology?
Yes, thank you. I think the notion of ecology is very important, especially in preventing the view of just adopting or integrating technology for technology's sake. So when we talk about classroom ecology, what we're really talking about is the idea that technology does not operate in isolation. So I like to see the classroom as a kind of interconnected system involving, we have teachers, we have learners, we have tools, but we also have institutional structures. We have, for example, curricular goals, we have the available digital equipment, and also social learning conditions, right? So, for example, I have noticed in my practice when I've worked with teachers, the same digital tool that worked really well, really extremely well in one classroom, even within the same school might not work as well, or it might completely fail in another classroom. And this is usually dependent on factors such as, let's say, the student's digital literacy does not sort of match the tool that has been sort of introduced, or the teachers might not be prepared to harness these technologies, or there might just be time constraints. So there's less time to use the tool, or maybe there is not as much support or training that the teacher has gone through. So I think the ecological perspective is important because it sort of like prevents us from treating technology as some kind of magical solution. It's not the fact that just by introducing technology, it will improve learning. No, we have to be mindful of the conditions that make that happen. So in my own practice, for example, I tend to look at, and also in my research, I tend to divide the ecology into three levels. So I want to promote sort of alignment between these three levels in order for tool use to be effective. So we have the environmental level where you look at factors such as the institution, training, larger, even larger like societal conditions, norms about technology and so forth. Then you have the user level factors, which are of course the learners' backgrounds, teacher goals, teacher preparedness, and then you come to the tool and its affordances and constraints. So all tools, they come with limitations. There's no one tool that can solve all problems. So in order to introduce and integrate something, we need to look at each level and how well a technology can, for example, meet a certain goal. And when there's alignment between all three levels, that's usually when technology used leads to learning or enables participation. So teachers' work it is difficult, but by having that sort of ecological view, it can help understand not only what tools should we use, but actually for whom, under what conditions, and for what purpose.
I see. The classroom has a lot of different minds operating at the same time. It's funny because you can plan the same lesson for different classes and it will probably have completely different outcomes. So I imagine it works in the same way for technology, right?
No day is the same as the other. So even within the same classroom, one day a tool might work better than in another day. So again, as teachers, you need to be prepared for that too, and not sort of blindly trust the tools, but to understand when it goes wrong, like what might be the factors that affected that, like the multitude of learners, but also the kind of the days shifting, right? So
Mhm.
anything can happen in a set day that might also affect the teacher's opinion about a certain app or a certain software.
Who should decide what tools are integrated in this context?
This is such a tension, and obviously, researchers come with their recommendations, and teacher educators do amazing work. As we all know, decisions about educational technology, it often happens at multiple levels. So we have governments, for example, recommending certain systems. We have the school system itself with the teacher training programs. We have commercial companies, providing us with certain technology. Then we have curriculum developers, principals, and then slowly we come to the individual teachers. And of course, all of them influence to a certain extent what gets used in the classroom. However, I think that the challenge here is that these large scale decisions, they don't always align with what teachers or learners actually need in specific classroom contexts. So to give you an example, for example, during the pandemic, I worked with Somali background learners, and they, due to the conditions, of course, they were expected to complete assignments through their institutional learning platforms or learning management systems. And they were also expected to use computers or laptops in their homes. But as I found out, many of these students, they did not own laptops, or they shared one device with several family members, even sometimes up to 10 family members. So as you can imagine, they didn't have the time or even the opportunity to complete these assignments using the designed or assumed device. At the same time, I also found that these students were really highly capable of using their smartphones. That, of course, that experience taught me that as teachers and curriculum designers, we need to have more flexibility, and it's important that teachers have agency so that um, they can sort of influence a little bit what gets used, because obviously they understand their students' realities much better than any centralized decision maker or any centralized system would do. So, sort of like moving to where I've tried to influence how decisions are being made, I strongly value collaborative design. And collaborative design or co design is kind of like an approach where when it comes to deciding about technology, you work together as a team. So you bring together researchers, you bring together teachers, students, and school leadership to shape technology integration in a certain context. And this kind of approach, the co-design, that can actually bridge the gap between, policies, what's coming from above, research to make it evidence-based, and also the classroom reality. So you gain the input of teachers and learners to understand what tool works and how. And another thing I wanted also to sort of emphasize here is when it comes to tools, even if many decisions are made at the large scale level and top to bottom, the strategies and the technologies that tend to work for the most marginalized learners in the classroom, those are usually the ones that benefit everyone. And specifically in my research with refugees and using mobile technology, what I noticed was when students use, for example, when the students have different digital literacies, and some of them might not be able or might not even have had a smartphone or not have been used to any device before, using sort of peer scaffolding and being able to put students to work together to train each other in using new technology, that's a very effective strategy to help them overcome differences in digital literacy. And it also supports a wider range of students, where those who are already confident can get recognition for their skills. So I think that there are a lot of value in collaborative approaches, and also in kind of like designing technology integrated education with marginalized learners in mind. I think those are really important ways to integrate technology to bring that bottom up approach.
Yeah, I get it. It is a mutual effort. And the more general parts of this design, like this, sorry, structures, this bigger part of the structures, they need to listen to the realities of the classroom and to these individual learners' needs. I really liked your example of the Somali students because they didn't have the tools to deal with the assignments at home. And we had the same situation here in Brazil, especially during the pandemic. It was something that we are all very familiar with. So we understand how imperative it is that we listen to the marginalized communities so we can build something that encompasses the complexity and the realities of all the students, right? And given the circumstances, what kind of professional development might be appropriate for the teacher, for this teacher, to work with these different levels of technology integration?
Yes, thank you for this question. And my answer will build a little bit upon what I just said about, for example, co-design. So in my research and in my work, I found that when I work with teachers, professional development, it needs to be practical. It needs to be collaborative. It needs to also be sensitive to their contexts. But it's also important to be respectful of the teacher's workload. So so to start with, one thing I've sort of observed is that teachers are far more likely to engage with new technology and also with training that feels relevant to their classrooms and to their students. For example, I used to work with three teachers for my doctoral research, and it was, I mean, all three teachers, they came with a comment that what they've learned through, officially organized teacher training by the government, by the ministry, they didn't feel that it matched their realities, and even if it was evidence informed, they felt like it was so far from being connected to, let's say, the needs of immigrant students or even the tools that would be useful for teaching language. A second thing that I also noticed in that work and also in my other projects with teachers is that, as we know, teachers are balancing enormous workloads. So any professional development that is organized, it has to respect their time and also their realities. And what I've noticed, as you can see in the important work you do online, I think online workshop can sometimes increase participation levels among teachers because they reduce the travel and the scheduling barriers that some teachers face when it comes to, putting even unpaid hours towards their own development. And it's so important to meet the teachers where they're at and understand that they're already balancing a lot of different things. So as trainers, as teacher educators, we need to also take the step and meet them halfway through. And another option, which I've exercised myself, is of course to go to their classroom. So as a researcher who's also been a teacher and understand that reality, to go and work with teachers in their own classroom to collaboratively design and test out different interventions, because of course that makes it more practical and more relevant to their contexts.
Mm-hmm.
So, and lastly, I wanted to mention, of course, the collaborative models, and I wanted to sort of like break down why it's so important to work collaboratively with teachers. So, as you can imagine, especially with the introduction of AI and how it's sort of permeating our society, there are many teachers who feel very uncertain about how to integrate new technologies. Whether it's apps, AI, anything that's new that even if they might use it in their personal lives, just integrate it pedagogically or integrating it with students that they just gotten to know can be quite intimidating. And I think that the opportunities that come with experimenting together with a colleague or experimenting with a researcher, it it helps them, gain that confidence they need, and they can observe, modeled practice. They can share their fears or their thoughts about technology experiences and discuss challenges openly. And I think that's very important when it comes to building new skills and to build that autonomy that they need to use it continuously in their practice, moving from there, and simply just the ownership. A new tool, unless you see it being worked with your students, it's very hard to believe that it can actually do something, if it's just something that you haven't really envisioned to be used in your classroom. And lastly, what I want to say is that regardless of the format, and also this kind of like underscores the meaning of collaboration, is that teachers also need to be treated like as knowledgeable partners, because in a lot of these teacher training programs, they just become passive recipients of innovation. And I think that when they understand that they can use these tools at a level that is evidence-based, practical for the students, and can actually lead to change, that's when they will feel the ownership, and that's when they will feel that technology is doing something good. So I think that those are the things that we should emphasize more in professional development programs for teachers that will lead to more sustainable practice with technology.
Yes, it is so important, like to build this connection, this network with teachers, right? To establish a sort of community that we can change and we can develop our own pedagogical practices together. Because, for example, as you said, practicality, doing something that you can see how it impacts your classroom, you can see the work. And it is interesting because here we do, for example, workshops. And online workshops is something that we are probably going to pursue in the future. But it is so good to see firsthand how these spaces of teacher development create this sort of safe environment for teachers to test different technologies, different apps. You can see new ideas for tech integration sort of brewing there. So thank you for your review of this subject. It's very interesting how you approach everything with such like in-depth detail. And the last question is, based on your article, Pedagogical Uses of ICT in Finnish and Chilean Schools, a systematic review that you developed with two other researchers, how could you exemplify some common digital technology practices in Chile and in Finland?
This was a very interesting research project based, of course, on secondary sources. But I worked with two really talented researchers from Chile, and I got insight also into the Chilean context through them. So we were able to compare our own backgrounds and experiences as teachers in the context. So it was a very rich project in the sense that we all learned a lot about what were the similarities and also what were the differences in terms of how teachers use technology in the two countries. So to sort of like consolidate a little bit the findings, and what we found interesting was that in both countries, teachers tended to use technology comfortably for teacher-led practices. So, for example, they were comfortable using technology for administrative purposes, learning management systems, platforms that were, school based. They were also comfortable with like teacher led presentations in the classroom, administering or delivering quizzes. This was before the pandemic. Okay, so the practices were mostly teacher led before the pandemic. And when it came to student centered practices, such as, having students collaborate through Google Docs, or using peer interaction software where they could actually, talk together, or even just embedding student generated digital content, those appeared less common before the pandemic. However, our research also showed that during the pandemic, there was a shift. And we saw that teachers in both countries, they became more creative and more flexible, because this was basically what the remote sort of learning environment required. So it required more student autonomy, and it required more interaction, right? Because people were participating remotely in education. At the same time, it's also important to emphasize that challenges in the two countries during the pandemic and with regard to technology integration, they were not equally distributed. So whereas in Finland, internet connectivity or things that had to do with organizing remote education, there were not so many problems. But in Chile, in particularly, there were issues related to, internet connection and unequal access to devices especially in the students' home that were more in a remote region of the country.
Mhm.
And I think that what this demonstrates, and it's important to keep in mind, both global digital divides, but also local digital divides, and that innovation when it comes to technology, it's not only about teacher willingness. So here, structural conditions, they matter enormously, and even when teachers are highly motivated or, let's say, forced by pandemic, they might still struggle when it comes to using tools innovatively because of access or because of infrastructure. So I think this again highlights that no matter, what the time or what the context, we need to discuss this integration and the practices that are possible with questions of equity and access.
I understand. It's like you said, take these bigger instances. They may have a different view, but only the teacher knows what's going on inside their classroom and their own context. And the pandemic was indeed a divide because it basically highlighted different ways that we had to be creative in order to adapt our available tools to these students' realities. As you mentioned, there is this optimized view of technology, but we know the challenges that we had, right? Like, for example, with the students' access to different devices. In the article, it's mentioned that in Chile, some students didn't have certain access, and it was very common here in Brazil as well. So we are very familiar with this scenario. And we are heading to the end of the episode. So I would like to officially thank you, Linda, for talking to us today. You have the capacity of highlighting the key points specifically. It's been a really good conversation, and I'm sure everybody's going to learn a lot from you and your points, and they're going to reflect a lot.
I hope so. I mean, that was the main message. I want people to reflect and to understand that sometimes their struggles are not their individual struggles, because as we can see, across countries, teachers are facing similar challenges, and it's important to know you're not alone, and taking sort of advantage of the collaborative opportunities, the online workshops. It's so important when you know that you're limited as a teacher, and researchers and teacher educators, governments, they should understand this. Like, I feel that's so important that message comes out, that teachers need to be supported, but at the same time be agentic, and being able to choose for their students and choose with their students.
I love the way that you tackle these very complex difficulties and challenges by making sure we understand we are not alone, that we have a community and we need spaces and we need opportunities to build this community, because we want to evolve as teachers and we want to be able to integrate these technologies that are so needed, that are so present in our interconnected world. And we want to do it well for our students. So it is very enlightening how you point to specific topics that show us a way on how to do so. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me participate. It was a pleasure really to be part of this podcast, and I learned a lot of new things about your program, and also, I mean, it's really impressive what you're doing with teachers and teacher educators in Brazil. So I'm really glad for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to EFOPLI Connects. This is Anna Souza from Projeto Saber Conectado. If you liked today's episode, subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. And to know more about our projects, follow us on Instagram at EFOPLI UFPB.